And now we're moving on to summer. This is generally our peak summer period. This generally lasts from July to late August, I would say. Normally 4th of July kind of kicks off that midsummer bite up here. Might be a little different for where you're at. And generally this is water temps from 65 to 75 or higher, kind of depending on where you're at. And this is when fish really complete that progression out to secondary structure. You know, in the spring, early summer, those fish are still on those primary pieces of structure, and in the summer period we start fishing a lot of that 20 to 30 foot zone and stuff that's not connected to the shoreline, right? That's off that first break. Another thing to think about this time of year is that bait starts to move off structure this time of year. In the early spring and early summer, those fish, those bait fish, those perch, those bluegills, they're all bundled up next to shore. During that midsummer period, a lot of these fish make the progression out over open water, and there's a lot of life kind of out over the basin, and that's exactly why the walleyes are out there this time of year. So here's kind of a summer location, right? You can see we got our primary break up in here shallow. This is kind of like your primary piece of structure, right? These next couple humps are your secondary pieces of structure. This is your secondary break here, the one that kind of falls out to the depths of the basin, right? This might be 15 feet in your lake. This might be, 40 feet in your lake. Whatever it is, this is your secondary break right here. Primary break, secondary break. Fish in this summer period do most of their relating to these secondary pieces of structure on the secondary break, like you can see these fish out here in the tip of this point. So you can see also we have a hump here. This is a total basin oriented hump, all deep water around it, comes up to 27 feet. This is the kind of areas on a GPS that we're looking for this time of year. Now, once you kind of highlighted some of these areas, figured out where you want to go, what are you looking for on those spots? Whether it's a hump, point, or a flat, basically what we want to be seeing is rock, very deep weeds, or obviously fish roaming in these areas, or just out on larger flats that fit this description, right? So how do you go about finding this stuff? Side imaging is a great tool, even in deep water, to find structure. Now, this is a time of year where sonar and down imaging are much more of a player, because we're driving around in 20 to 30 feet of water. Those fish are not getting spooky of us, and we can use sonar and down imaging a lot more to our advantage, right? We get a much better picture of the bottom in these deeper depths with those two tools. So even on side imaging here, you can see we've located some deep rock. I'm not going to be able to see fish on side imaging in that deep rock. But over here we have a bunch of walleyes set up right off the edge of this. You can see this rock kind of comes to here. This is definitely the high spot right here, kind of runs like this. And these fish are sitting right out here off the tip of this rock. And you can see there's a whole bunch of walleyes there on side imaging. Very compact school, right? That's absolutely what we want to see. Now, in summer, here's your down imaging and sonar shot, probably of the same thing, right? 26 feet of water, water 76, middle of summer. And you can see, looking at down imaging, side imaging here, this is what a loaded spot looks like. If you see this, you are on the right stuff, and that is a lot of walleyes that you need to catch. So that is exactly what you're looking for there. Here's kind of another one, deep rock. We're in 21 feet right here. On down imaging, you can see this is some great looking rock. Good character to it. We got some big stuff here, little rocks here, and a little bit up and down to it. You flip over to down imaging, you can see you got fish there, and you can see the same thing on sonar too. Definitely a midsummer picture right there. Now, if you're fishing deep weeds, always down imaging is an absolute must. Side imaging will show you those fish too, but you can see if you're looking at sonar here, it just kind of looks like weed tufts. And if you need to flip it over to down imaging, you can see these crystal clear marks just off the side of that weed edge, or that weed cluster. And this is a lot of times what we see in a lot of our very clear lakes in the middle of summer when fish relate to weeds. Now, as far as presentations go this time of year, this is where there's many more options when you're fishing deep water versus shallow water, right? There's almost endless options for different ways to catch these fish, and there's few that are more popular or effective right now than the Acme Hyper Rattle style baits, the jigging wraps, your shiver minnows, and I like to call them like speed jigging baits. And if you guys are not familiar with these, it is an absolute killer for anytime fish are really in deep water or water deeper than 15 feet. I use this the most in the middle of summer and into the fall, and here's kind of how we fish this bait in the middle of summer. Fish on. It feels like a decent one. Just felt that one ripped up, hit bottom, and as many of them do, just trapped it right to bottom. Nice walleye. Look at that thing. Oh yeah. That is what we're talking about. And that is the power of these absolute speed jig baits. Alright guys, there we go. Stud of a Northwoods, Hayward, Wisconsin walleye. We'll take them all night long like that. So it's a very aggressive way to fish, right? Now, what I'm not gonna do is I'm not gonna look at a big giant flat with a fish here, fish here, fish here, and try to do this. This is a scenario where I'm looking for that school of fish that's very tight knit, right? And this is a lot of times how we're catching these fish this time of year. This is absolute my #1 go-to for jigging this time of year. There is another option, and I'll use this one a lot more in weeds, and that's a swim bait. And a lot of times I'm rigging up swim baits on 1/2 or 3 ounce heads, and this is a little bit better tool when you do, if you are gonna cast or jig and you have fish kind of spread out through a large area, because you can make a very long cast with this and fish it very effectively. And this is kind of how I'm fishing swim baits in this midsummer period. So basically when you're fishing a swim bait, I'm typically making a long cast. A swim bait's a great tool to cover water or fish for fish that you see. It's a good cover water bait because you can put on a heavy head, throw it a mile, work it fast, stuff like that. So basically I'm going all the way down to the bottom, and I want to do that on pretty much a slack line, so that bait's just not kind of doing this on the way down real slow. I don't want to lose a whole bunch of length off my cast if I'm fishing deeper water. Now once I'm on the bottom, I'm basically going to take my rod from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock real hard. I'm going to pop it up like that, and I'm just going to hold my rod there. I'm not going to drop my rod at all. And when you don't drop your rod at all, basically that bait's snapping up real quick, and it's a slow pendulum down. That tail's moving on the way down. The bites on a swim bait pretty much always happen when it's going down. Sometimes fish will pick it up off the bottom. When you're going like that, you're holding that rod high, and that tail's just moving real slow on the way down. Hook, oh, fish on. There's only about 3 or 4 casts in. Ripping that swim bait. Absolutely love that bite. Just pounded it. It feels like a good black walleye. Oh yeah. Look at that guy. Go ahead and scoop him up here. And those are the bites you expect out of a swim bait. They're feeding heavy, and they are absolutely smoking big swim baits. Look at that thing. We'll talk a little bit about what we're using, how you fish these things, and everything you guys need to know about snapping swim baits around on this little swim bait shoot. So that's kind of the swim bait. It's a lot different than like your Acme Hyper Rattle, your Jigging Rapper, your Shiver Minnow. That bait you're fishing in very close proximity to you, or just straight vertical. The swim bait, less good vertical, more good on a bomb cast. You can throw a mile, you can snap, you can cover a lot of water very quickly, and the bites are absolutely ferocious. Very fun way to fish, and very aggressive, which is always a great thing too. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the least aggressive approach, which is the Slit Bobber, right? This is most of the time in the middle of summer. We start kind of getting away from more of our leech presentation and going to more crawlers. Generally, mid-July, we see that leech bite start to die and the crawler bites start to get much better. But the presentation's still the same. We're still fishing this Thill Wobble Bobber. This time of year, we're definitely going to that bigger size, that 3/8 size or half, because we're going to put a little bit more weight. We might even go up to 1/4 on that egg weight. And then you're still running that 2 to 3 foot lead down to your live bait jig. And the reason I like running that live bait jig plus the weight in there, it just gets all that stuff down to the depth very quick. And especially this time of year when we're power slip bobbering. In early summer we were just kind of slip bobbering. We're throwing stuff back, letting it drift around from a spot lock position. When we're power slip bobbering, we're moving around very quick with the boat. We're waiting until we see fish right on the graph, and we're dropping our slip bobbers right in the prop wash, and we're just kind of sitting there next to them. Basically, we're waiting 30 seconds to a minute for these fish to bite. If they don't, we're leaving, gonna go find some more, or might attempt another drop. But this is the deal here. This video kind of shows it well. It's a split screen graph and a video on us. So you're going to kind of see us right away. We're going to see the fish, we're going to drop, and then you'll see how quick it actually happens for you. Alright, we got stacks. We got stacks on stacks. Actually, it's only like 2 or 3 fish. Right on top of each other. I am down, dude. They're everywhere. There's fish. Oh my gosh. I mean, they're just everywhere. Alright guys, I am down. Got picked up. Fish on. You doubled up on the Slit Bobber. You guys can see that big stack of fish down there. I'm just gonna reel it. Mine's not a giant, but a good walleye. Leech stuck right in the roof of his mouth. What do you got, same size? Couple of beauties there. Alright, you guys can see how efficient this is. You know, you could drift around, try to cover enough water to get in front of them, or you could actively drive around, drop that slip bobber on them. When they're on this leech bite, it's an extremely effective, extremely efficient way to fish, and we're having a blast doing it out here on Mille Lacs. So that's kind of the power slip bobber, and that's basically how we're doing it all year long, kind of no matter what lake or what structure we're fishing. We're driving around, we're using sonar, we're using down imaging, we see those fish, we drop, and we expect to bite very quickly, right? Super fun way to fish, and rigging your slip bobber up with a lot of weight like in this diagram here will definitely help you out doing that. Now, in summer, there's another way we catch fish, which is obviously trolling. I troll more in the summer than I do any other time of year. And during the midsummer period, a lot of these large natural lakes in northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, these fish tend to do a lot of suspending, especially the quality of fish that generally start to move out of the basin is generally very, very good. And these fish might also be using deep flats or deep structure at the same time. You know, it's not like any fish is really stagnant. There might be fish over the basin that pushes into structure, but you have a lot of the population of fish that start spending a lot more time out over open water. And there's really only one way to target those fish, and that is by trolling. You can't jig them, you can't really cast for them. This is definitely a trolling bite. Definitely the most efficient way. Like I said, a lot of times this is our best big fish bite of the year here in the Northwoods. And a lot of times your target zone as far as how deep you want your bait down is 20 to 30 feet. But this might be over 40 or 70 feet of water. And you know, here's a couple of great pictures of northern Wisconsin walleyes. And a lot of times, like I said, this is one of my favorite times to be in a boat. I love to troll and I love fishing over open water. But to a lot of guys, this is a big mystery, right? It's the where do you start trolling over open water? Well, here's a couple of great diagrams. And kind of the easiest spot if you're trying to get your feet wet doing this is look at a map, find the biggest complex piece of structure in the lake. Either your biggest huge rock bar, rock flat, huge points, a whole bunch of humps right next to each other, and get out on that break. You can see I've highlighted this black line here. This is the trolling pass that you want to take. You want to be going right down this line here. This is a whole bunch of humps and points and very complex structure. You know, a month ago there was a ton of fish up on this stuff. Well, now they might just be right out in the basin adjacent to this stuff. So a lot of times they'll get right on this break line where it kind of breaks out to basin from there, and that's where I'll start fishing. The other one is over these very large basin transition areas. You can see on this map here on the right, I've got this deep 50-foot flat right before it breaks out to the basin. And a lot of times you get a hard to soft bottom line there. And that's exactly what we're fishing. A lot of times these fish will suspend 20, 30 feet down over this 50 to 60 or 50 to 70 foot break. It's very weird they know that stuff's down there, but they definitely do, and they definitely hold up above that stuff. And here's kind of a great picture of that hard to soft bottom line. It's kind of a natural bait fish magnet. And because of that, it's also a predator fish magnet too. But you can see here we got a great picture. This is obviously your soft bottom. This is obviously your hard bottom. You kind of see it on sonar too here. This is hard over here, soft over here. Now, you can also see we got a ton of bait here. Some of this bait is way out of the strike zone of a walleye, but that doesn't mean a walleye might not swim down, or you know, the bait might not swim up to get in the zone too. And you can see that transition right there and all that bait relating to it. So what do walleyes look like? Yes, we graph walleyes out over open water. You don't see as many just because I think those fish are moving around a lot and it's hard to get a real crisp, clean mark out of a fish that's down 25 over 60 feet of water. But this is what you're looking for right here. Here's a couple of solid marks, and a lot of times, since these are bigger fish, you're seeing a single mark, you might see a double. Very rarely are you seeing like 4, 5, 6 walleyes kind of all packed together. This is what you're looking for here. Here's a bait cloud. Here's a pot of walleyes sitting right under them. This is exactly what we're looking for a lot of times when we're fishing over this open water. You can see it's 47 feet deep here. We're not fishing 47 feet down. If these fish are down about 30, I'll probably put my bait down about 25 to catch them. So what are the presentations? Well, it kind of varies a little bit depending on where you go, but you're either trolling crankbaits or you're trolling crawler harnesses, right? Last year was a killer crawler harness bite for me. The crankbait bite sucked. The year before was a great crankbait bite. Crawler harnesses were kind of average. But you know, we're running planer boards, we're running 6, 8 rods, depending on how many guys we got in the boat. And we'll either run bottom bouncers or snap weights or some kind of weight, either from 1 ounce kind of to 2 ounce, generally is what I'm using. And this time of year, we are using just crawlers on our crawler harnesses, so we want the 2 hooked rig, right? Speeds, generally, we're talking 1.2. That is basically the benchmark. You know, you can go a little bit either way and kind of play around, but basically 1.2 is kind of where I start every day. And here's kind of your classic high skies, midsummer walleye bite that we fish a lot of up here in the Northwoods. You know, look at this weather for a second. This is how I feel like all of July has been. Just hot, super flat out. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about today what this kind of conditions does to fish. And it kind of makes them just float in this clear water. A lot of times they're not going to lock down to structure when it gets like this. And these fish just turn into roaming floaters out in the basin or around structure. And today we're pulling spinners for 100% suspended fish, and the quality is going to be good, Mitchell, I think. When you're doing kind of this 100% open water suspended bite, and you know, it pretty much works everywhere on these deep clear lakes that we fish a lot of. There's a nice walleye right there. Alright guys, there we go. Just a quality chunker Hayward area walleye, and these are the exact kind of fish you can expect when you get on this kind of pattern. So that's kind of your classic open water scenario. You can see we're pulling planer boards, we're running crawler harnesses on those, and the quality of fish is very good. And basically how you determine depth is just a lot of kind of playing around with it. You know, a lot of times you can kind of look wherever you see the most life. If most of life is 15 foot down, start there. Obviously it helps when you got, you know, 3 rods a guy like in Wisconsin, because it gives you a little bit more, you can kind of play with depths. But a lot of times if you kind of put stuff in that 18 to 25 foot, that's how far you're putting baits down, you're going to be in a great scenario to catch those fish that are 20 to 30 down. If all of a sudden one line length starts hitting, you know, change a few more like that and you're going to be able to put that pattern together pretty quick. Now, the other thing to troll is obviously big cranks. This time of year, my hands down 3 favorites, the Berkeley Flicker minnows and number 9s and 11s. That purple Descent color is an absolute killer in clear water. I absolutely love that one. We catch a lot of walleyes on Smithwick top 20s too. That's a very aggressive, wobbly side-to-side deal. And then the Reef Runner 800s. All these baits have the ability to dive to that 20-foot range, and you can throw weight onto a snap weight or an inline weight to achieve greater depths. And it's the same kind of deal. That, you know, running crankbaits, we're going much faster, 1.8 to 2.2 in the summertime. And you just got to play around with it. I would much rather troll cranks because I can go much faster, cover a lot more water, but a lot of times it's a crawler harness deal. So you really just kind of got to play around with it and see what those fish want. But basically when we're trolling, that's our setup in the summer. That's what we're doing. Those are the spots we're targeting, and it is an absolute killer all year up here, and you see very, very few guys out in the basin doing it.